She presented brilliantly despite contractions starting mid-pitch and closed by showing the ultrasound with "Future CEOs, courtesy of your business partner," pointing directly at him. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. New York, 2008. The bitter winter air stung Gabrielle Johnson's cheeks as she ascended the steps of the luxury high-rise in Manhattan. Her heart raced, not from the sixth-floor climb, the elevator was under maintenance again, but from the weight of what she carried. Not just her worn leather briefcase containing meticulous financial analyses, but the knowledge that had been confirmed this morning after weeks of suspicion. She was pregnant. At 26, Gabrielle had achieved what most would consider impressive success. A Harvard degree in economics, a rising position at J.P. Morgan, and for the past 3 years, a relationship with Marcus Reynolds, heir to the Reynolds technology dynasty and current CEO of Reynolds Innovations. The kind of man her mother had warned her would never take a girl from Brooklyn seriously. "He's different," she had insisted to her skeptical mother. "He values my intelligence, my ambition." Gabrielle paused at the doorway of the penthouse apartment they shared, straightening her pencil skirt and tucking away a stray curl that had escaped her carefully maintained bun. She'd spent the day planning this moment, rehearsing words, anticipating responses. Perhaps this would be the catalyst to formalize their relationship. Marcus occasionally spoke of family, of legacy. The first time they met flashed through her mind, a corporate mixer 3 years ago. She was a junior analyst. He was already a rising star in tech. She'd challenged his assessment of an emerging market, offering data he hadn't considered. Instead of dismissing her, he'd been intrigued. "Harvard?" he'd asked, noting her name tag. "Full scholarship," she'd replied, refusing to be intimidated by his Yale pedigree. By the end of the evening, he'd offered her his private number. 6 months later, she'd moved into his apartment. Gabrielle took a deep breath and unlocked the door. The penthouse was bathed in the amber glow of Manhattan's skyline. Marcus sat at the dining table, crystal tumbler of whiskey beside his MacBook, brow furrowed as he reviewed financial projections. He didn't look up immediately, a habit that once seemed charmingly focused but increasingly felt dismissive. "You're late," he said, eyes still on the screen. "Emergency client meeting," Gabrielle replied, setting down her briefcase. She removed her coat, buying seconds to steady her nerves. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something important." He sighed, closing the laptop. "If it's about the Mitchell account, I've already spoken to Palmer. It's being handled." "It's not about work." Gabrielle moved to his side, pulse hammering. "It's about us." Marcus finally looked at her, blue eyes calculating. At 32, his features had the sharp definition wealth often sculpts: confident, entitled, unaccustomed to unpleasant surprises. Gabrielle reached into her purse and withdrew the pregnancy test, placing it on the table beside his financial reports. "I'm pregnant, Marcus." The silence that followed was absolute. Manhattan traffic, 14 floors below, seemed to halt. Marcus stared at the plastic stick as if it were a venomous snake that had somehow slithered onto his imported mahogany table. Then came the laugh, short, cold, humorless, that would echo in Gabrielle's nightmares for years to come. "You're joking, right?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "This is some kind of ill-conceived prank." "I'm 8 weeks along," Gabrielle said, her own voice sounding distant to her ears. "I confirmed it at the doctor's this morning." Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection superimposed over the glittering city skyline, king of all he surveyed. "This isn't happening," he said flatly. "This isn't part of the plan, Gabrielle." She moved toward him, hands trembling slightly. "I know it's unexpected, but—" "Unexpected?" He turned, face contorted in a way she'd never seen. "It's catastrophic. Do you have any idea what I'm navigating right now? The Series C funding, the board restructuring?" We can figure this out together, Gabrielle interjected, still clinging to the script she'd rehearsed. We've always talked about eventually. A black, pregnant woman does not fit the image I need to project to Wall Street investors right now. The clinical precision of his words sliced deeper than any shouted insult could have. You're a burden I cannot carry. Gabrielle staggered as if physically struck. A burden? We've been together for 3 years. You thought what? Marcus moved past her to the bedroom, emerging with a suitcase that he threw open on the sofa. That we were playing house? That this was heading toward some middle-class fantasy of marriage and children? He yanked open her side of the closet, grabbing handfuls of her carefully curated wardrobe and tossing them haphazardly into the suitcase. Go back to Brooklyn, to your middle-class family, and forget you ever met me. He didn't yell. His voice remained terrifyingly controlled. You never belonged in my world, and you never will. How dare you? Gabrielle's shock crystallized into outrage. I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard. I'm the youngest senior analyst in my division at JP Morgan. That? Marcus scoffed, continuing to empty her belongings into the suitcase. You're mediocre, Gabrielle. Your work is predictable, your vision limited. I was with you because it was convenient, because you were dedicated and unquestioning. He gestured toward her midsection. But this changes everything. Each word landed like a precise incision, surgical in its cruelty. The Marcus before her bore no resemblance to the man who had whispered ambitions against her skin, who had once claimed her intelligence was what attracted him most. What about the baby? Gabrielle asked, one hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Your child has rights. Marcus walked to his desk, wrote something with furious strokes, then thrust a check toward her. $10,000, he said coldly. Solve the problem or raise the child alone, but don't come looking for me again. My lawyers are already instructed. Gabrielle stared at the check, the amount simultaneously insulting in its inadequacy and horrifying in its purpose. With deliberate movements, she tore it in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the imported marble floor. I don't want your money. Marcus's expression hardened. Your choice. Now get out. You can't just throw me out. We live together. I have rights. The apartment is in my name. The utilities are in my name. Your phone is on my corporate plan. Each statement another door slamming shut. You have exactly what you walked in with 3 years ago. Nothing. The finality in his voice silenced her protests. This wasn't an argument. This was an execution. Gabrielle moved woodenly, gathering essential documents from the desk drawer, her Harvard diploma, passport, birth certificate. Marcus watched impassively, checking emails on his phone as if she were already gone, a task completed. You'll regret this, she said finally, voice barely audible. I doubt that very much, he replied without looking up. At 11 o'clock, with the temperature hovering near freezing, Gabrielle Johnson stood on the sidewalk outside the building she had called home for 3 years. The doorman, who had greeted her with deferential nods every day, now avoided her gaze, instructed by Marcus's swift call downstairs. She pulled out her phone to call a friend, but the screen remained black, service already disconnected. Her corporate credit cards, she discovered at the nearby ATM, had been blocked. In her wallet, $23.42. Harvard degree tucked safely in her briefcase, Gabrielle walked 12 blocks to the Harlem subway station, where she spent the night on a hard plastic bench, one hand protectively over her abdomen, the other clutching her pepper spray. The following months tested every ounce of resilience she possessed. Gabrielle returned to her mother's cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, sick with shame. Evelyn Johnson asked few questions, simply made up the bed in Gabrielle's childhood room and promised, "We'll figure it out together, baby." Returning to JP Morgan proved impossible. Her position had been mysteriously eliminated during a restructuring. Subsequent interviews at other financial institutions ended with polite rejections. Marcus's connections had ensured doors would remain closed. By her 4th month of pregnancy, Gabrielle was working as a waitress at a diner in Williamsburg, her Harvard economics degree tucked in a drawer beneath uniforms that grew tighter as her body changed. Between shifts, she visited overcrowded public prenatal clinics, waiting hours for 5-minute appointments. In her 6th month, during a rare ultrasound, the technician paused, adjusted the wand, and smiled. "Well, Ms. Johnson, here's a surprise. You're carrying twins." That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, something within Gabrielle transformed. Staring at her reflection in the mirror, exhausted eyes, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, the curve of her belly now impossible to hide, she saw not just the abandoned woman, but glimpsed the woman she could become. "He's wrong," she whispered to her reflection, voice gaining strength with each word. "About me. About us." Her hand caressed her swollen abdomen where 2 lives grew. "I'm going to show him exactly what I'm capable of." That night, operating on a clarity that cut through months of fog, Gabrielle did 3 things. She applied to Wharton's MBA program, drafted a rudimentary business plan based on a flaw she'd identified in the financial system during her time as an analyst, and wrote a letter to her unborn children. "You will never need his name, his money, or his approval," she wrote in steady script. "We will build our own empire." As she sealed the letter in an envelope marked, "For my children," Gabrielle couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later, she would be the one in a position of power, watching Marcus Reynolds beg for a chance to know the children he had rejected before they were even born. The envelope trembled in Gabrielle's hands as she slid it into her nightstand drawer. Dawn was breaking over Brooklyn, painting the worn walls of her childhood bedroom with pale light. She hadn't slept, the twins restless inside her as if responding to her newfound determination. Writing that letter had crystallized something within her, a blueprint for survival that would require more strength than she knew she possessed. "You will build our own empire," she whispered, echoing the promise she'd written to her unborn children. The words sounded impossible in this tiny room with peeling wallpaper, yet she clung to them like a lifeline. 3 sharp knocks on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Gabby? You up?" Her mother's voice, already tired though the day had barely begun. "Yes, Mom." Gabrielle pulled herself from the bed, her 6-month pregnant body making even this simple movement an effort. Evelyn Johnson stood in the doorway, her nurse's scrubs already on, gray streaking her temples, premature aging from decades of night shifts and worry. She studied her daughter with eyes that missed nothing. "You didn't sleep again." It wasn't a question. Gabrielle didn't bother denying it. "I made a decision last night," Gabrielle said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm applying to Wharton's MBA program." Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. "Business school? Now?" "Yes, now." Gabrielle moved to the small desk where her laptop sat open to the Wharton application. "There's a part-time evening program. I can work during the day, study at night." "Honey," Evelyn's voice softened with concern, "you're carrying twins. You're exhausted already and what?" Gabrielle's voice cracked slightly. "Should I give up? Accept that Marcus was right about me being mediocre? About not belonging in his world?" Her mother crossed the room, taking Gabrielle's hands in her own. "You know that's not what I meant. That man was wrong about everything. I'm just worried about you pushing yourself too hard." "I have to push, Mom. These babies deserve better than—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the humiliation still too raw. Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then we'll figure it out. Together." 2 hours later, Gabrielle stood shivering at the bus stop, clutching a folder containing printed copies of her resume. Her once expensive wool coat strained against her growing belly, the last remnant of her former life that still fit. The biting February wind cut through the thin fabric of her pants, department store maternity wear hastily purchased with her mother's credit card. The first bank was the most humiliating. The hiring manager's eyes widened slightly at her obviously pregnant state before scanning her resume with practiced neutrality. "Very impressive credentials, Ms. Johnson. Harvard, J.P. Morgan. May I ask why you left your previous position? Gabrielle had prepared for this. The company was restructuring. My division was eliminated. The manager nodded, making a note. I see. And your reference at J.P. Morgan would confirm this? Of course, she replied, the lie bitter on her tongue. She had no references. Marcus had seen to that. Well, we'll certainly be in touch if what? Gabrielle pressed, knowing already what was coming. If a suitable position becomes available, the manager finished smoothly. By the third rejection that week, the pattern became unmistakable. Doors that should have been open to a Harvard graduate with her experience remained firmly closed. After the seventh interview ended with the same vague promises, Gabrielle returned to her mother's apartment and opened her laptop. What she found made her stomach clench. On a private finance industry forum, someone had posted, "Warning about Gabrielle Johnson, ex-J.P. Morgan, emotionally unstable, terminated for erratic behavior." Reynolds' connection confirmed the details privately. Proceed with caution. Marcus hadn't just thrown her out, he'd poisoned the well. That evening, swallowing her pride, Gabrielle walked into Denny's in Williamsburg. The manager, a harried woman in her 50s, looked her up and down. How far along are you? 6 months. Twins. No point hiding it. The manager sighed. Look, I'm not supposed to ask, but I need to know if you can handle an 8-hour shift on your feet. We're short-staffed and I need reliable people. I can handle it, Gabrielle said firmly. I need this job. The uniform they gave her was too small, the polyester stretching uncomfortably across her belly. Her swollen feet screamed in protest at the cheap non-slip shoes. But that night, Gabrielle Johnson, summa cum laude from Harvard, carried plates of pancakes and refilled coffee cups until 3 in the morning. When she counted her tips at home, $42.17, she lined up the bills on her desk next to the Wharton application fee, $200. 5 more shifts, she calculated. 5 more nights of aching feet and condescending customers, and she could submit her application. The following week brought a new low. Sitting in the crowded waiting room of Brooklyn Community Health Center, Gabrielle clutched her number, 73. They were currently serving 39. Around her, other pregnant women in various stages waited, some with toddlers climbing over them, others looking as exhausted as she felt. 4 hours later, a rushed doctor spent exactly 7 minutes with her, measuring her belly and listening briefly to the heartbeats. Blood pressure's a bit high, he noted, not looking up from his chart. You need to rest more. Gabrielle almost laughed. I'm working full-time. I don't have a choice. The doctor finally looked at her, seeing her for the first time. Ms. Johnson, you're carrying twins and showing signs of potential preeclampsia. This isn't a negotiation. You need to reduce your stress levels. That night, back at Denny's, Gabrielle dropped a stack of plates when a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. The crash brought the manager running. Go home, she said, helping Gabrielle to a chair, and don't come back until you have a doctor's note saying you're fit to work. Gabrielle sat at the kitchen table that night, coins and bills spread before her, calculating and recalculating. The application fee, the prenatal vitamins, the mounting credit card bill on her mother's card. Without the Denny's job, they wouldn't make rent next month. Evelyn found her there at midnight, still working the numbers that refused to add up. I failed them already, Gabrielle whispered, hands protectively cradling her belly. I can't even provide the basics. Evelyn pulled out a chair, sitting beside her daughter. You listen to me. My mother cleaned houses to put food on our table. I worked double shifts as a nurse to send you to that fancy prep school, and you're going to find a way too. That's what Johnson women do. The next morning, Gabrielle applied at 2 more restaurants that advertised flexible scheduling. By afternoon, she had shifts at both, one from 9 in the morning until 2, the other from 4 until 9. With tips from both, she might just manage. Weeks blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. Gabrielle served breakfast at Joe's Diner, lunch at Williamsburg Cafe, then dragged herself to the public library where she worked on her Wharton application until closing time. The essay question, "Describe a personal challenge and how you overcame it," seemed to mock her with its presumption that her challenges were in the past tense. In her 6th month, at another rushed prenatal appointment, the technician moved the ultrasound wand over Gabrielle's now prominent belly. "Let's check on these little ones." "Oh!" The technician adjusted the screen, moving the wand slightly. "Well, Ms. Johnson, you've got quite a surprise here." Gabrielle's heart rate spiked. "Is something wrong?" "No, not wrong at all, but I'm definitely seeing 2 distinct heartbeats. You're having twins." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "Twins?" Gabrielle repeated numbly. "You're sure?" "Absolutely positive. See here?" The technician pointed to the screen. 2 heads, 2 heartbeats. "Congratulations! You're going to have double the joy." Double the joy. Double the responsibility. Double the cost. Double everything that already seemed impossible to manage alone. That night, in the solitude of her childhood bedroom, Gabrielle finally broke. The tears she had been holding back for months came in heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for the future she had imagined, for the betrayal that still burned fresh, for the children who would never know their father, for her own naivete in believing Marcus had ever truly seen her as an equal. When the tears finally subsided, Gabrielle dragged herself to the bathroom mirror. The woman who stared back was barely recognizable. Hollow-eyed, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing a stretched-out t-shirt over her swollen belly. But as she continued looking, something shifted in her reflection. Behind the exhaustion, she glimpsed a steely determination she hadn't recognized before. "He's wrong," she whispered to her reflection, voice growing stronger with each word. "About me. About us." Her hands cradled her belly where 2 lives grew. "I'm going to show him exactly what I'm capable of." Returning to her room with renewed purpose, Gabrielle powered up her laptop. First, she finished her Wharton application, writing an essay that laid bare her current circumstances with unvarnished honesty. Then, she opened a new document and began outlining a business plan based on a critical flaw she had identified in financial services during her time at J.P. Morgan, the systematic exclusion of underserved communities from basic banking services. As dawn broke, she addressed an envelope containing her completed Wharton application, using the last of her tip money for express postage. Next, she wrote a letter to her unborn twins, pouring out her heart on paper. "My beloved children," she wrote, "you will never need his name, his money, or his approval. We will build our own empire." She sealed the letter in an envelope, marked it, "For my children," and placed it in her nightstand drawer. In that moment of quiet resolution, Gabrielle couldn't possibly imagine that 12 years later, those words would become prophetic, that the business plan scribbled in her worn notebook would become the foundation of a billion-dollar empire that would one day make Marcus Reynolds appear utterly insignificant. The letter to her unborn children became Gabrielle's talisman in the months that followed. Whenever doubt crept in, she would open the drawer, touch the envelope, and remind herself of the promise she had made, not just to her children, but to herself. When the contractions began 3 weeks early, Gabrielle was alone in her mother's apartment. Evelyn was working a double shift at the hospital, and the twins seemed determined to make their entrance without waiting for ideal circumstances, a fitting start for children who would never know the luxury of perfect timing. "It's okay," she whispered to her belly, wincing as another contraction gripped her. "We can do this." Her hands trembled as she called for a taxi, the $20 in her wallet barely enough for the fare to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. Each bump in the road sent waves of pain through her body. "First baby?" the driver asked, eyeing her through the rearview mirror. "Babies," Gabrielle corrected, breathing through another contraction. "Twins." "Father meeting you there?" Gabrielle turned toward the window, watching Brooklyn blur past. "No, father," she said simply. "Just me." The delivery room was a whirlwind of machines, voices and pain more intense than anything Gabrielle had imagined. Without her mother, who was still unreachable at her shift, Gabrielle faced the terror alone, each push accompanied by the crushing awareness that the one person who should have been there had chosen to erase her from his life. "I need you to push harder, Ms. Johnson," the doctor urged, her voice seeming to come from very far away. Gabrielle gathered every ounce of strength, thinking of her letter, of the promise. "I can do this," she gasped. "I can do anything." At 3:17 in the morning, Miles Johnson entered the world with a powerful cry that belied his tiny size. 4 minutes later, Maya followed, quieter but with eyes that seemed to take in everything, even in those first moments. "They're beautiful," the nurse said, placing the swaddled infants in Gabrielle's arms. "You did amazing, especially all by yourself." All by yourself. The words should have stung, but as Gabrielle looked down at the two perfect faces, Miles with a chin that already hinted at Marcus's profile, Maya with eyes shaped exactly like his, she felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Gratitude that Marcus had shown his true nature before these precious children could be hurt by his callousness. "We're going to be extraordinary," she whispered to them. "The three of us against the world." The twins spent 2 weeks in the NICU due to their premature arrival, giving Gabrielle precious time to recover and prepare. Evelyn took emergency family leave from the hospital, transforming their small apartment into a makeshift nursery with second-hand cribs and donated baby clothes. When the acceptance letter from Wharton arrived 6 weeks after the twins' birth, Gabrielle was nursing both babies simultaneously, a skill she had mastered out of necessity. "Mom!" she called, voice cracking with emotion. "Mom, I got in!" Evelyn rushed in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What is it?" "Wharton. I got accepted to the MBA program, with a partial scholarship." Gabrielle couldn't stop the tears. "They said my essay was uncommonly compelling." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, baby, I never doubted you for a second." Reality quickly tempered the celebration. The partial scholarship would cover tuition, but not living expenses. Night classes meant childcare, books, supplies, transportation. The costs multiplied in Gabrielle's mind, a spreadsheet of impossibilities. "We'll figure it out," Evelyn insisted, taking Maya from Gabrielle's arms. Johnson women always do. The first night class at Wharton was a study in contrasts. While her classmates arrived in business attire coming straight from their corporate jobs, Gabrielle slipped in wearing the one decent outfit she owned, still smelling faintly of the diner where she'd worked until 4 that afternoon. Her eyes were heavy with the particular exhaustion known only to parents of infants, a bone-deep weariness that coffee couldn't touch. She took a seat in the back row, aware of curious glances. At 27, she wasn't the youngest in the class, but she was certainly the most visibly stressed. "First day jitters?" asked the man next to her, his Tom Ford suit and Rolex suggesting he'd never worried about affording formula or diapers. "Something like that," Gabrielle replied, opening her second-hand textbook. When the professor called for introductions, each student stood, detailing impressive careers at consulting firms, investment banks, and tech companies. When Gabrielle's turn came, she rose slowly. Gabrielle Johnson, Harvard Economics, former analyst at JP Morgan. She paused, debating how much to reveal, then decided on honesty. Currently working as a waitress at Denny's and raising 4-month-old twins. Here because I believe financial systems can be reimagined to serve communities traditionally excluded from wealth creation. A beat of uncomfortable silence followed, broken by the professor's thoughtful nod. "Perspective is invaluable in business, Ms. Johnson. I suspect yours will be particularly instructive." The routine that developed over the following months defied human endurance. Gabrielle woke at 5 to feed the twins before her mother took over. She worked breakfast and lunch shifts at Denny's, rushing home to nurse the babies before heading to evening classes. After class, she studied until 2 in the morning, often with one or both infants asleep on her chest. Weekends meant double shifts to make up for the work hours lost to class time. Her first class presentation came after a night when Miles had spiked a fever, leaving Gabrielle with exactly 43 minutes of sleep. She stood before her classmates, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes, and delivered an analysis of microfinance opportunities in urban food deserts that left even the professor speechless. "Exceptional work, Ms. Johnson," he said when she finished, "particularly under your circumstances." The circumstances only grew more challenging. When the twins were 6 months old, Gabrielle arrived home from class to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, expression grave. "What's wrong?" Gabrielle asked, instantly alert despite her exhaustion. "Just feeling a bit under the weather," Evelyn said, but something in her eyes told a different story. 2 days later, they sat together in a sterile hospital room as an oncologist explained what the scans had revealed: pancreatic cancer, stage 4, already spread to the liver. "How long?" Evelyn asked directly while Gabrielle sat frozen beside her. "With aggressive treatment, perhaps 6 months. Without, 3. That night, after putting the twins to bed, Gabrielle joined her mother on their small balcony. The Brooklyn air was warm with early summer, the street below alive with the sounds of the neighborhood. "You can't leave me," Gabrielle whispered, the words catching in her throat. "I can't do this alone." Evelyn took her daughter's hand. "You won't be alone. You have Miles and Maya. They're babies, Mom. They need me, not the other way around. You're stronger than you know, Gabrielle. You always have been." Evelyn's voice was steady despite everything. "And you're not going to be alone. This building is full of good people. Ms. Rivera downstairs has offered to help with the twins. Mrs. Patel from the 3rd floor, too." "It's not the same," Gabrielle insisted. "No, it's not, but it's something, and something is what we work with." True to her word, Evelyn helped Gabrielle establish a support network among the other mothers in their building, a rotating schedule of childcare that allowed Gabrielle to continue working and studying even as she took on more of her mother's care. 6 months into the MBA program, Gabrielle discovered her classmates had been following the story of Marcus Reynolds' engagement to Catherine Wellington, daughter of Senator Wellington, in the business press. "Isn't that the guy who used to date someone from JP Morgan?" one classmate asked during a break. "I swear I heard he was with some analyst before he upgraded to the senator's daughter." Another student pulled up the society page on his phone. "Yeah, check it out. Their wedding cost $2 million. Flowers flown in from Holland. Custom Vera Wang dress. 500 guests at the plaza." The phone was passed around the group until it reached Gabrielle, who found herself staring at Marcus's smiling face. He stood beside a willowy blonde in a gown that probably cost more than Gabrielle's entire year of expenses. They looked perfect together, two golden people from the same privileged world. "Some guys have all the luck," someone commented. Gabrielle handed the phone back without a word, her expression neutral despite the storm inside. That night, in the bathroom of their tiny apartment, she finally allowed herself a moment of doubt. "What am I doing?" she whispered to her reflection. "Who am I kidding? I can't compete with that world." From the bedroom, one of the twins began to cry. Then the other joined in, their wails harmonizing in a duet of need. Gabrielle wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and went to them. Miles grabbed her finger as soon as she reached into the crib, his tiny hand wrapping around it with surprising strength. Maya, always more observant, watched her mother's face with eyes that seemed to understand far more than any 7-month-old should. "You're right," Gabrielle said, lifting them both. "This isn't about competing with his world. It's about building our own." The idea that had been germinating since her days at JP Morgan began to take more concrete form. During late-night feedings, Gabrielle sketched out plans for a financial technology platform that would provide services to communities traditionally neglected by mainstream banks. Using algorithms that considered alternative data points beyond credit scores, her system could open doors for millions of people trapped in cycles of financial exclusion. She refined the concept for her entrepreneurship class, working on it during every spare moment, which meant primarily between 2 and 4 in the morning, with one or both babies asleep beside her laptop. When her professor asked students to present their business ideas to the class, Gabrielle's exhaustion vanished the moment she stood at the podium. For 15 minutes, she outlined her vision for a platform that would revolutionize access to financial services. The current system, she concluded, isn't just unfair, it's inefficient. There's untapped profit in serving the underserved if we're smart enough to see people as more than their FICO scores. The silence that followed her presentation lasted 3 full seconds before the room erupted in applause. Her professor approached afterward, business card extended. "Ms. Johnson, I'd like you to meet some colleagues of mine. This idea has potential." That evening, Gabrielle taped photos of Miles and Maya to the inside cover of her business plan notebook. Looking at their faces, she wrote beneath them, "For you, for us." When she clicked send on her application for a summer internship program, Gabrielle couldn't possibly imagine that the rudimentary business plan drafted during sleepless nights between feedings would become the foundation of a billion-dollar company that would one day make Marcus Reynolds appear utterly insignificant. The rudimentary business plan took on a life of its own in the months that followed. Each night, after tucking the twins into their cribs, Gabrielle would open her laptop and refine her vision, adding details and addressing potential challenges. The idea had evolved from a vague concept into something tangible, a blueprint for financial inclusion that excited her in a way nothing had since before Marcus's betrayal. On a bright June morning, 3 years after the twins' birth, Gabrielle stood in the auditorium of Wharton's Executive Education Center, adjusting the second-hand blazer she'd carefully steamed the night before. Around her neck hung the twins' teething rings on a discreet silver chain, her good luck charm for the MBA graduation ceremony. "Gabrielle Johnson," the dean announced, and she crossed the stage with measured steps, accepting her diploma with a firm handshake. From the audience, Evelyn beamed with pride, thinner now but determined to witness this moment despite her declining health. Beside her sat Miles and Maya in matching outfits from the clearance rack, their 3-year-old faces solemn as they watched their mother. "That's Mama," Evelyn whispered to them, pointing. "That's your brilliant Mama." Later, as they celebrated with cupcakes in their small apartment, Maya climbed into Gabrielle's lap and touched the tassel on her graduation cap. "Pretty," she said, her vocabulary already advanced for her age. Miles, always more analytical, examined the diploma with unusual focus. "Mama smart," he declared. "Yes, your mama is very smart," Evelyn agreed, snapping photos with her old digital camera. "Harvard and Wharton smart." That evening, after the twins were asleep, Gabrielle sat at the kitchen table with her mother, a stack of bills between them. "The diner manager offered me more shifts now that I've finished school," Gabrielle said, calculating figures in her notebook. "If I work doubles on weekends, we can catch up on the medical bills." Evelyn placed her hand over Gabrielle's. "You didn't get an MBA to keep serving pancakes, baby. It's time to get back into your field." "No one's exactly lining up to hire me, Mom." Marcus made sure of that. "That was 3 years ago. His influence can't last forever." The next morning, Gabrielle received an email that changed everything. Professor Richardson, her entrepreneurship mentor, had forwarded her business plan to a colleague at Goldman Sachs. "They're looking for innovative thinkers in their technology division," the professor wrote. "Your background combined with your fresh perspective makes you an ideal candidate. Interview next Tuesday at 9. Gabrielle stared at the screen, heart racing. Goldman Sachs, one of the most prestigious firms on Wall Street, a foot back in the door of the financial world. "Mom," she called out, voice trembling, "I got an interview at Goldman." The weekend passed in a flurry of preparation. Gabrielle couldn't afford a new suit, so she took her one decent blazer to the neighborhood tailor for alterations. She practiced interview questions while bathing the twins, rehearsed salary negotiations while cooking dinner. Evelyn helped by taking the children to the park, giving Gabrielle precious hours to research Goldman's latest technology initiatives. On Tuesday morning, Gabrielle stood before the bathroom mirror, applying mascara with a steady hand. Her natural curls, which she had once chemically straightened to fit into Marcus's world, were pulled back in a sleek bun. Professional, but not a denial of her identity. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You're ready." The Goldman Sachs building loomed above her, glass and steel stretching toward the sky. Inside, the lobby bustled with people who looked like they'd never had to check their bank balance before making a purchase. Gabrielle straightened her shoulders and approached the reception desk. "Gabrielle Johnson for an interview with Mr. Hoffman, Technology Division." The interviewer, a silver-haired man with rimless glasses, reviewed her resume with an inscrutable expression. "Harvard, J.P. Morgan, Wharton MBA," he noted. "Impressive credentials." Then a significant gap. He looked up. "Can you explain the 3-year hole in your employment history?" Gabrielle had anticipated this question. "I became a mother and simultaneously pursued my MBA. During that time, I also developed the business concept outlined in my application." "I see." He leaned back. "And you believe you can handle the demands of our environment? We typically expect 60 to 80 hours per week." The implication was clear. How could a single mother possibly manage? "Mr. Hoffman," Gabrielle said, meeting his gaze directly, "I completed a rigorous MBA program while raising twins and working as a waitress. I routinely operate on 4 hours of sleep. Efficiency isn't just a business principle for me, it's how I survive." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Furthermore," she continued, "my circumstances have given me insights into financial exclusion that most of your analysts will never have. I've experienced firsthand the systems that fail hard-working Americans, which is precisely why my business concept targets an underserved market segment with significant profit potential." The interview shifted after that. Rather than questioning her capabilities, Hoffman began probing her ideas. By the time Gabrielle presented her concept for alternative credit scoring algorithms, he was leaning forward, genuinely engaged. "Your approach is unorthodox," he admitted when she finished, "but potentially valuable. We need diverse perspectives." 2 days later, the offer arrived. Associate, Technology Division, Goldman Sachs. The salary was twice what she had earned at J.P. Morgan before the twins. For the first time in 3 years, Gabrielle allowed herself to imagine a life beyond mere survival. Her first day at Goldman was a study in contrasts. The other new associates arrived in designer suits, discussed their summer homes in the Hamptons, compared notes on which private schools had accepted their children. Gabrielle wore her one good suit, now expertly tailored to hide its age, and listened to them discuss a world she had once brushed against but never truly inhabited. "Johnson, right?" A young man extended his hand. "Blake Winthrop, Yale undergrad, Harvard Business. You were at Wharton?" "Yes," Gabrielle replied. "And Harvard for undergrad. No kidding? What brought you to Goldman?" Before she could answer, they were ushered into orientation. The day passed in a blur of paperwork, security protocols, and system training. By 5 o'clock, when most new associates were heading out for welcome drinks, Gabrielle was rushing to the company's daycare center on the 3rd floor. "Mama!" Miles and Maya chorused when she appeared at the door. They ran to her, small arms outstretched, faces alight with joy. The daycare provider looked surprised. "They're yours? They're so advanced for their age?" Maya was helping the other children with puzzles, and Miles already knows his numbers to 100. Pride swelled in Gabrielle's chest. "They're pretty special." That night, tucking the twins into their beds in the slightly larger apartment they'd moved into with her new salary, Gabrielle whispered, "Mama's going to work very hard to build our future. Sometimes I'll be tired, but I'll always come home to you." "Promise?" Maya asked, her eyes serious. "I promise. Nothing is more important than you two." The promise proved harder to keep than she'd anticipated. Goldman's culture was even more demanding than J.P. Morgan's had been. 80-hour weeks were standard, with constant pressure to prove herself worthy of the position. As the only black woman in her division, and the only parent without a stay-at-home spouse or nanny, Gabrielle operated with zero margin for error. Her colleagues remarked on her efficiency, unaware that while they lingered over lunch or drinks, she was maximizing every minute to avoid paying late fees at daycare. When they arrived at 9 with coffee, she had already been up since 5, feeding the twins and reviewing market reports before dropping them off at 7:30. 3 months into her new role, Gabrielle was preparing a crucial presentation when her phone rang. The daycare director's voice was apologetic but firm. "Ms. Johnson, Miles has a fever of 102. You'll need to pick him up immediately." Her team leader Davies frowned when she explained the situation. "The presentation is in 2 hours, Johnson. Can't someone else handle this? Your nanny, perhaps?" "I don't have a nanny," Gabrielle said, already gathering her files. "I'm a single parent." His expression shifted from annoyance to something like pity. "I wasn't aware. Well, email me what you've completed and we'll make do." The implied judgment stung worse than outright criticism. Making do. As if her work were a concession rather than an asset. Miles's fever developed into an ear infection requiring 2 days at home. Gabrielle worked remotely, laptop balanced on the kitchen counter while she prepared medications and comfort foods. When she returned to the office, Davies informed her that Parker, a junior associate with half her qualifications, had been assigned to present to the client. "We needed someone we could count on being present," he explained. The pattern continued. Despite consistently producing the highest quality work in her division, Gabrielle watched as colleagues with less impressive outputs were given leadership opportunities and client-facing roles. 6 months in, during a performance review, her manager delivered the verdict explicitly. "Your work is exceptional, Johnson, but we're concerned about your availability for advancement. Leading a team requires unpredictable hours and travel. With your responsibilities at home, we're not sure you're ready." That evening, she found Marcus's ghost in every word. "You jamais terá o que é preciso. You'll never have what it takes." The next morning brought news that shattered everything else. Evelyn, who had been in remission for nearly a year, collapsed while watching the twins. The cancer had returned, more aggressive than before. 3 months, maybe 4. The doctor said gently in the hospital corridor. "We can make her comfortable, but there are no further treatment options." Gabrielle stood motionless, the fluorescent hospital lights humming above. The twins sat quietly in plastic chairs, somehow sensing the gravity of the moment. "I need to take family leave," she told Davies the next day. "My mother is dying." His discomfort was palpable. "Of course, HR can discuss your options. But Johnson," he hesitated, "this timing is unfortunate. We're selecting candidates for the leadership program next month." The message was clear. Her family crisis would cost her professionally. In the weeks that followed, Gabrielle created a patchwork support system among neighbors and other mothers from the twins' preschool. Mrs. Rivera from downstairs watched the children when Gabrielle had critical meetings. The Patel family took them for playdates when she needed to visit her mother at the hospice center. In return, Gabrielle helped with homework, babysat on weekends, and offered what little she could to maintain the delicate ecosystem of mutual aid. Between hospital visits and work deadlines, she continued refining her business concept. The laptop glowed in dark hospital rooms as she worked beside her sleeping mother, determined to keep both her job and her dream alive. One night, as Gabrielle dozed in the hospital chair, her laptop open to a half-completed report, Evelyn woke and watched her daughter. "You're killing yourself," she said softly. Gabrielle straightened, immediately alert. "I'm fine, just finishing something for tomorrow." "You're not fine. You're trying to be everything to everyone." Evelyn's eyes, still sharp despite her failing body, held her daughter's gaze. "Your boss called, threatened about some report." "Davies? When?" "This afternoon while you were picking up the kids. Said something about reconsidering your position if you don't deliver." Anger flashed through Gabrielle. "He called you? When you're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "When I'm dying?" "Yes." Evelyn reached for her hand. "Baby, something has to give. And it can't be those children. It can't be your health." Later that night, watching the twins sleep in the fold-out chair beside her mother's hospital bed, Miles and Maya curled around each other like commas, Gabrielle made a decision. She opened her laptop and began working, not on Davy's report, but on her business plan. Until dawn, she refined algorithms, projected costs, and mapped out a path to market. When the twins woke, they found their mother still typing, a new energy in her movements. "Mama working?" Miles asked, climbing into her lap. "Yes, baby. Mama's building something important." She kissed his forehead. "Something that's going to change everything." 2 weeks later, she entered an early-stage startup competition hosted by a local business incubator. Her presentation, delivered in the same suit she'd worn to countless Goldman meetings, outlined a platform that would revolutionize financial access for underserved communities. She didn't win first place, but afterward, a woman approached her, tall, silver-haired, dressed in understated luxury. "Gabrielle Johnson, I'm Rachel Montgomery. You didn't win today, but your idea is the best I've heard in years." While clicking send on her resignation letter at 3 in the morning, Gabrielle couldn't possibly imagine that she was taking the first step toward creating a company that, in less than a decade, would be valued in billions and revolutionize financial access for millions of people marginalized by the traditional system. The resignation letter glowed on her screen at 3 in the morning, a digital manifestation of the most terrifying and potentially liberating decision of Gabrielle's adult life. Her finger hovered over the send button, trembling slightly. After everything she'd fought for, walking away from Goldman Sachs felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if her parachute would open. "For you! For us!" she whispered, glancing at the twins' photo taped to her laptop before clicking send. The soft chime of the email departing her outbox seemed inappropriately gentle for such a momentous action. Gabrielle closed her laptop and leaned back against the kitchen chair, suddenly aware of the profound silence in the apartment. This was the same kitchen table where she'd counted tips from Denny's, where she'd completed her MBA applications, where she'd fed the twins their first solid foods. It had witnessed every struggle, every small victory. Now it was witnessing her biggest gamble yet. 3 days later, Gabrielle sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her increasingly frail hand. Evelyn's complexion had taken on the waxy pallor that signaled the final stages of her illness, but her eyes remained sharp, evaluating her daughter's expression. "You did it, didn't you?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabrielle nodded. "Last night, Davy's already called to tell me how disappointed they are in my lack of commitment to the firm." A ghost of a smile crossed Evelyn's face. "Good. That place was killing your spirit." She squeezed Gabrielle's hand with surprising strength. "Tell me about this woman, this investor you met." "Rachel Montgomery. She made her fortune in medical technology in the 90s, then pivoted to venture capital. She's known for backing female founders, especially those with unconventional backgrounds." Gabrielle reached for the water cup, helping her mother take a small sip. "She wants to meet again tomorrow to discuss specifics." "You're going to take her money?" Gabrielle hesitated. "If her terms are reasonable, she's offering $500,000 as seed funding." Evelyn's eyes widened. $500,000? To my little girl? "To build something real, Mom. To make my idea come to life." The memorial service was small but dignified. Evelyn Johnson had requested no black clothing, no somber music. "Celebrate that I lived, don't mourn that I died," she'd instructed. So Gabrielle stood in a navy blue dress, holding Miles and Maya's hands as neighbors, colleagues, and friends from church shared stories of the woman who had raised her with such fierce devotion. "Your grandmother was the bravest person I ever knew," Gabrielle told the twins that evening as they sat on the living room floor surrounded by sympathy cards. "She worked so hard to give me opportunities, and now I'm going to do the same for you." Maya, perceptive beyond her 4 years, studied her mother's face. "Is Grandma with the stars now?" "Yes, baby. She's watching over us." Miles, always the practical one, pointed to the ceiling. "Can she see us crying?" Gabrielle pulled them both into her lap. "She can see us being brave, just like she taught us to be." The apartment felt impossibly empty without Evelyn's presence. Each night after putting the twins to bed, Gabrielle would sit at the kitchen table with her laptop, refining her business model, running projections, and researching potential competitors. The work kept her grief at bay, transforming it into purpose. 2 weeks after the funeral, Rachel Montgomery invited Gabrielle to meet at her office in the Flatiron district. The venture capital firm occupied the top floor of a renovated industrial building, all exposed brick and massive windows overlooking the city. "Gabrielle," Rachel greeted her, rising from behind a desk that appeared to be made from a single slab of reclaimed wood. At 62, she exuded the particular confidence of a woman who had succeeded in spaces designed to exclude her. "I've been reviewing your proposal. I have questions." For the next 2 hours, Rachel interrogated every aspect of Gabrielle's business model. Her questions were incisive, sometimes brutal, forcing Gabrielle to defend assumptions and clarify methodologies. Unlike the patronizing tone she'd endured at Goldman, Rachel's challenges felt like genuine tests of her concept's viability. "Your algorithm for alternative credit scoring needs refinement," Rachel noted, making a mark on her copy of the business plan. "But the fundamental insight is sound. Traditional banking has failed communities that represent billions in untapped market potential." Finally, she set down her pen and studied Gabrielle. "Now tell me something that's not in this document. Tell me how you, a single mother with 2 small children, plan to build this company while keeping your family intact." The question caught Gabrielle off guard. No potential employer or investor had ever acknowledged her children as anything but a liability. "I won't pretend it will be easy," she answered carefully. "But I've been operating in impossible circumstances since the day I was thrown out of my former partner's apartment while pregnant. I completed my MBA while working as a waitress and raising twins. I survived Goldman Sachs while caring for my dying mother." She met Rachel's gaze directly. "I've learned to be ruthlessly efficient with my time and to build support systems where none existed." Rachel nodded slowly. "I lost my husband when my daughter was 2. Built my first company while learning to be both parents to her." Understanding passed between them, the unspoken recognition of a shared battle. $500,000, Rachel said finally. 20% equity. I want monthly progress reports and quarterly in-person reviews. You'll have access to my network of financial technology contacts and legal advisors." Gabrielle's heart raced. This was really happening. "I accept." "One more condition," Rachel added, her expression softening slightly. "You bring those twins to our quarterly meetings. I want them to see their mother building something extraordinary." As winter melted into spring, Gabrielle transformed the kitchen table into the headquarters of what would eventually become Johnson Tech Solutions. The seed funding allowed her to invest in proper equipment: a high-end laptop, specialized software, market research subscriptions. She converted the small second bedroom, previously her mother's, into a home office, working there while the twins played or napped. The first months were a study in controlled chaos. Gabrielle coded late into the night, building the prototype of her financial platform while learning the fundamentals of startup management during the day. She joined online forums for tech entrepreneurs, attended networking events while neighbors watched the twins, and devoured every resource on financial technology she could find. Miles and Maya, now approaching their 4th birthday, absorbed their mother's new reality with the adaptability of young children. They learned to play quietly during her important calls, took pride in helping by sorting colored paper clips, and began referring to her laptop as Mama's Company. "Building business," Miles would announce solemnly when visitors asked what his mother did. "Helping people get money," Maya would add, having internalized the simplified explanation Gabrielle had given them. The prototype took shape, a platform that would allow users with limited or damaged credit histories to access financial services based on alternative data points, consistent bill payments, steady employment, even regular rent payments that traditional credit bureaus ignored. The system would partner with community banks and credit unions to offer services that big banks deemed too risky or unprofitable. 6 months into development, as Gabrielle was preparing for her quarterly review with Rachel, the twins returned from preschool with questions about a classmate's family vacation. "Daddy took them to Disney," Maya reported, watching her mother's face carefully. "Why don't we have a daddy to take us places?" The question Gabrielle had been dreading since their birth had finally arrived. She set aside her presentation notes and sat cross-legged on the living room floor, inviting them to join her. "You do have a father," she began carefully, "but he chose not to be part of our family." "Why?" Miles asked, his brow furrowing with the same analytical intensity he applied to his building blocks. Gabrielle considered various age-appropriate explanations before settling on simple honesty. He wasn't ready to be a father. He was afraid it would change his life in ways he didn't want. "Did we make him scared?" Maya's voice trembled slightly. "No, sweet girl." Gabrielle pulled her daughter close. "You weren't even born yet. He was scared of the idea of you, not the wonderful people you've become." "Will he ever want to know us?" Miles asked, the pragmatist as always. Gabrielle felt the familiar twist of pain mixed with anger. "I don't know, but what I do know is that we don't need him to have a wonderful life. We're building something special, just the three of us." That evening, after tucking them in, Gabrielle found herself scrolling through social media, something she rarely allowed herself time for. There, on the business news feed, was a photograph that stopped her cold. Marcus Reynolds and his wife Catherine attending a charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. The caption noted they had donated $1 million to children's education initiatives. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had rejected his own children was publicly celebrated for his generosity toward others. Catherine looked radiant in a custom gown, her hand resting protectively over a visibly pregnant belly. Marcus beamed beside her, every inch the proud, expectant father. For a moment, old pain threatened to engulf her. Then Gabrielle noticed something in his eyes, a brittleness behind the practiced smile, a tension at the corners of his mouth. Despite the perfect staging, he didn't look happy. Rather than dwelling on the past, Gabrielle returned to her presentation, channeling her emotions into refining her pitch. The next day, she presented her prototype to Rachel with such conviction that the investor immediately increased her commitment. "I'm doubling down," Rachel announced. "Another $500,000, same equity terms. You're ahead of schedule, and I want you to accelerate hiring your first developers." The validation was precisely what Gabrielle needed. She began recruiting a small team, 2 developers and a UI/UX designer who agreed to work remotely to keep costs low. The kitchen table headquarters expanded to include weekly video conferences and shared development environments. 8 months after leaving Goldman Sachs, Gabrielle was reviewing application code when her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with a Manhattan area code. "Ms. Johnson, this is Harold Myers from Megabank Legal Department." The voice was professionally clipped. "We've become aware of your development activities in the alternative lending space." Gabrielle's pulse quickened. Megabank was one of the largest financial institutions in the country. "Yes. We're sending a formal notice demanding immediate cessation of practices that directly compete with our proprietary systems and potentially violate our intellectual property protections." The blood drained from Gabrielle's face. "That's absurd. My platform operates on entirely original code and concepts. Nevertheless, we expect compliance within 48 hours, or we'll be forced to pursue more aggressive legal remedies." After the call ended, Gabrielle sat frozen at her desk. Megabank had virtually unlimited legal resources. Fighting them would drain her seed funding before her product even launched. This wasn't a legitimate claim. It was a strategic move to crush a potential disruptor before it gained traction. When she called Rachel in panic, the investor's response was unexpectedly calm. "They're scared of you. That's excellent news." "How is that excellent? They can bury us in legal fees." "Gabrielle, powerful entities don't waste resources attacking irrelevant startups. They've seen your concept and recognized its potential to threaten their market position." Rachel paused. "I'm sending someone to meet you tomorrow. Her name is Sophia Chen, best technology attorney I know, and she specializes in David versus Goliath scenarios." When clicking send on her resignation letter at 3 in the morning, Gabrielle couldn't possibly imagine that she was taking the first step toward creating a company that, in less than a decade, would be valued in billions and revolutionize financial access for millions of people marginalized by the traditional system. Sophia Chen arrived at Gabrielle's apartment the next morning, a petite woman in her 40s with a sleek bob and eyes that missed nothing. She declined coffee, pulled out a laptop, and immediately began dissecting Megabank's legal threat. "This is textbook intimidation," Sophia said, scanning the cease and desist letter. "They're claiming broad intellectual property violations without specifying what exactly you're supposedly infringing upon." Gabrielle bounced Maya on her knee while Miles colored quietly at the kitchen table. "So what do we do? I can't afford a prolonged legal battle." Sophia watched the twins with a soft expression before her face hardened with resolve. "We don't fight on their terms. We change the battlefield." She closed her laptop with a decisive click. "I'll represent you pro bono." "Pro bono? Why would you do that?" "Because 15 years ago, I was a new lawyer who took on a giant pharmaceutical company that had poisoned my hometown's water supply. Rachel Montgomery funded my case when no one else would." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "I believe in paying it forward. And frankly, I hate bullies." In the weeks that followed, Sophia crafted a brilliant counter-strategy. Rather than engaging in costly litigation, she went public with Megabank's tactics, carefully framing the story for technology and financial media outlets. A promising innovation for underserved communities threatened by a banking giant. "We're positioning you as David to their Goliath," Sophia explained as they prepared for a press call. "Americans love an underdog." The twins darted around the apartment as Gabrielle adjusted her webcam, smoothed her hair, and tried to look more confident than she felt. This interview with TechCrunch could determine whether her company survived or died before it truly began. "Miles, Maya," she called. "Mama needs 15 minutes of quiet for a very important meeting. Remember our special quiet time game?" The twins nodded solemnly. At 4 years old, they had adapted to their mother's unconventional work environment with remarkable resilience. Miles arranged his number blocks in careful rows while Maya settled with a picture book, both understanding instinctively that this was one of those moments when Mama needed their cooperation. As the interview began, a crash from the kitchen sent Gabrielle's heart racing. The reporter's eyebrows rose as childish giggles erupted off camera. "I apologize," Gabrielle said, fighting to maintain her professional demeanor. "As a single mother running a startup from home, occasionally my executive team makes their presence known." To her surprise, the reporter smiled. "Ms. Johnson, the fact that you're building financial technology to help underserved communities while raising twins solo makes your story even more compelling. Would you mind if they made a brief appearance? It adds a human dimension to the David versus Goliath narrative." That interview became the first of many. "FinTech founder takes on banking giant while raising twins," read the TechCrunch headline. Other outlets picked up the story, and suddenly, Megabank found itself cast as the villain in a narrative that resonated with both the tech community and the general public. "They miscalculated," Sophia told Gabrielle after Megabank's legal team reached out to discuss an amicable resolution. "They thought they could quietly crush you. Instead, they've given you a platform." The case never made it to court. Under mounting public pressure and facing potential regulatory scrutiny over anti-competitive practices, Megabank withdrew their cease and desist letter. The publicity attracted attention from smaller banks and credit unions looking for innovative ways to expand their customer base. On a crisp October morning in 2013, Gabrielle Johnson officially launched Johnson Tech Solutions from her kitchen table. The incorporation papers were stacked next to a bowl of Cheerios. Her laptop displayed the company's first website, while beside it lay a hand-drawn logo colored by the twins, a bridge spanning a gap, symbolic of connecting underserved communities to financial opportunities. "We are officially in business," she announced to Miles and Maya, who celebrated by dancing around the kitchen in their pajamas. "Mama's company!" Maya cheered, clapping her hands. "JTS! JTS!" Miles chanted, having already memorized the company's acronym. Gabrielle fashioned makeshift business cards and a laminated ID badge that she wore proudly as she dropped the twins off at kindergarten later that morning. "Today is a special day," she told them at the school gates. "It's the first day of kindergarten for you and the first day of Mama's company." "Will you make lots of money?" Miles asked, his economic awareness already developing. "Not right away," Gabrielle answered honestly. "First we have to build something valuable that helps people." "Then money?" he persisted. "Then maybe money," she agreed with a smile. The reality of running a startup quickly proved more challenging than even Gabrielle had anticipated. While the twins adapted to their school routine, she juggled coding sessions, investor updates, and endless virtual meetings with potential partners. Her kitchen table became command central. Laptop, notebooks, financial projections, and children's homework all competing for space. Her first virtual pitch to a regional credit union nearly ended in disaster when the twins burst in during the climax of her presentation, arguing loudly over a toy. "I'm so sorry," Gabrielle apologized, trying to maintain her professional composure while separating the children. The credit union's CEO, a woman in her 50s, waved away her concerns. "I raised 3 kids while building my career. Carry on, Ms. Johnson. Your platform's potential ROI is far more interesting than perfect Zoom etiquette." That credit union became Johnson Tech's first official partner, agreeing to implement a pilot program of Gabrielle's alternative credit scoring system for a small subset of loan applicants who would typically be rejected under traditional criteria. The early weeks were marked by a relentless pattern of rejection from larger financial institutions. "Your model is interesting, but too risky," became a familiar refrain. Gabrielle kept meticulous notes after each rejection, refining her approach, adjusting the algorithm, strengthening her pitch. The breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. A small community credit union in the Bronx, serving primarily immigrant communities, saw immediate value in Johnson Tech's approach. "Our members are hardworking people who pay bills consistently but don't show up in traditional credit systems," the manager explained. "Your platform gives us data-driven justification to approve loans we intuitively know are sound." As Miles and Maya settled into kindergarten, displaying the same quick minds and determination that characterized their mother, Gabrielle established a workable routine. School drop-off by 8, intense work until 3, then juggling homework supervision with business calls until bedtime, followed by coding sessions that often stretched until 2 in the morning. The twins adapted to their mother's unconventional schedule, learning to play independently when she was on important calls and proudly helping with simple tasks like sorting paperwork. Miles showed an extraordinary aptitude for numbers, counting to 100 before many of his classmates mastered 20. Maya developed remarkable language skills, often serving as the family diplomat when dealing with neighbors or service providers. Late one night, as Gabrielle hunched over her laptop coding a critical security feature, a small hand touched her shoulder. "Mama working hard," Miles observed, his pajama-clad form silhouetted in the hallway light. "Yes, baby. What are you doing up?" Maya had bad dream. "I told her you're making our empire." Gabrielle's heart twisted at hearing her own words reflected back by her 4-year-old son. "That's right. But you both need sleep to help build it." After tucking them back in, she returned to her code with renewed determination. The prototype was taking shape, a platform that could analyze alternative data points like consistent rent payments, utility bill history, and employment stability to create a more holistic financial profile than traditional credit scores provided. Just as Johnson Tech began gaining traction with a handful of credit unions, disaster struck. A letter arrived from Megabank's legal department, this time alleging that Johnson Tech's platform used methodologies that infringed on patents pending in their advanced analytics division. "This is harassment," Sophia fumed during an emergency meeting in Gabrielle's living room, while the twins built elaborate block structures nearby. "They're trying to bury you in legal costs before you can establish market presence." "Can they actually win?" Gabrielle asked, fear constricting her chest. "No, but they don't need to win. They just need to drain your resources until you give up." Sophia studied the legal documents. "But I have an idea." Rather than fighting defensively, Sophia crafted a bold counter-strategy. She filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission alleging anti-competitive practices, while simultaneously preparing a compelling case for the court of public opinion. The case attracted the attention of a federal judge known for his skepticism toward corporate overreach. During the preliminary hearing, he expressed open doubt about Megabank's claims. "Your alleged patent infringements seem remarkably broad and conveniently timed," he noted, peering over his glasses at Megabank's legal team, almost as if they were designed specifically to prevent competition rather than protect legitimate intellectual property. 3 weeks later, in a decision that sent ripples through the financial technology sector, the judge dismissed Megabank's case with prejudice, noting in his written opinion that innovation in financial services should not be stifled by established institutions seeking to maintain market dominance through legal intimidation rather than competitive excellence. The victory generated substantial media coverage. Technology blogs celebrated the David versus Goliath narrative, while financial publications noted that Johnson Tech represented a growing trend of fintech companies challenging traditional banking models. The publicity proved more valuable than any marketing campaign Gabrielle could have afforded. Within days, 3 more credit unions reached out about implementing her platform. A small regional bank expressed interest in a larger-scale partnership. One evening, as Gabrielle reviewed partnership agreements at the kitchen table, Rachel called with unexpected news. "The Johnson Tech case has caught attention beyond the financial sector," she reported. "You've been invited to speak at next month's Financial Inclusion Forum. Major players will be there, including regulators who've been pushing for more innovation in underserved markets." The invitation marked a turning point. Johnson Tech was no longer just a struggling startup but a recognized voice in the evolving conversation about financial access and inclusion. With Rachel's guidance and Sophia's continued legal support, Gabrielle navigated the rapid expansion of her company. The initial seed funding, carefully managed, allowed her to hire 2 part-time developers to accelerate the platform's development, while Gabrielle maintained control over the core algorithms. 10 months after launching from her kitchen table, Johnson Tech Solutions moved into its first real office, a small space in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, not far from the apartment where the journey had begun. The space had previously housed a graphic design firm, leaving behind chipped paint and exposed brick walls, but to Gabrielle, it represented a monumental achievement. "This is the beginning of our empire," she told the twins as they explored the modest 2-room office, their eyes wide with excitement. "Can we have desks too?" Maya asked, already claiming a corner as her own. "Of course. Every empire needs brilliant advisors," Gabrielle replied, watching as her children immediately began planning their workspace with the same seriousness she applied to business decisions. The hiring process revealed another challenge of founder life. Candidates with impressive technical credentials often displayed subtle shifts in demeanor when learning the company was led by a young black woman with young children occasionally visible in the background. Gabrielle developed a sixth sense for those who saw her vision versus those merely seeking a paycheck. Her first 3 employees reflected this careful selection. Raj, a brilliant developer who had grown up in a South Bronx neighborhood underserved by traditional banks. Elena, a UX designer who had previously worked at a major financial institution but left, frustrated by their resistance to innovation. And David, a part-time operations manager who was himself a single parent and understood the balance Gabrielle maintained. As they toasted with sparkling cider in plastic cups, surrounded by second-hand furniture in their modest office, Gabrielle felt a sense of accomplishment that transcended mere professional success. She had built something from nothing, not just a company, but a testament to resilience. To financial inclusion for everyone, she declared, raising her cup. To Johnson Tech, her small team responded. Lifting her glass in the small Brooklyn office, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that in just 7 years, she would be commanding a company with more than 700 employees in 5 countries, revolutionizing financial access for millions of people the traditional system had ignored. The sparkling cider in plastic cups couldn't compare to champagne and crystal flutes, but the joy in that modest Brooklyn office surpassed anything Gabrielle had experienced in her former life. This moment, surrounded by her tiny team in a space they could barely afford, felt like the first real vindication of her vision. Johnson Tech Solutions existed not just in her mind or on incorporation papers, but as a living entity with employees, clients, and purpose. 5 years later, Gabrielle stood in the gleaming headquarters of Johnson Tech Solutions in San Francisco, gazing through floor-to-ceiling windows at the bay beyond. The conference room behind her hummed with activity as her executive team prepared for the quarterly board meeting. At 36, Gabrielle Johnson had become a force in the financial technology world, her company having secured $25 million in Series A funding 2 years prior, followed by a $100 million Series B round just last quarter. The numbers from Q3 are ready for your review, her chief financial officer reported, sliding a tablet across the polished table. We've exceeded projections by 17%. Gabrielle nodded, scanning the data with practiced efficiency. Excellent. And the expansion into the Chicago market? Ahead of schedule. We're already processing applications through 3 regional credit unions. The contrast between this sleek operation and those early days working from her kitchen table still amazed her. Johnson Tech now employed 300 people across offices in San Francisco, New York, and Chicago. The platform that began as a simple alternative credit scoring system had evolved into a comprehensive financial technology ecosystem serving previously underbanked communities. Her phone vibrated with a text from her assistant. Miles' math competition starts in 40 minutes. Car waiting downstairs. I need to step out, Gabrielle announced, gathering her notes. My son's competing in the state mathematics championship. We'll reconvene at 3. No one questioned her departure. The culture she had built at Johnson Tech embraced family commitments as priorities, not inconveniences. Perhaps because everyone knew the company itself had been born alongside her children. The auditorium buzzed with nervous energy as middle schoolers adjusted their name badges and parents claimed seats. Gabrielle slipped into the back row, having mastered the art of the inconspicuous entrance. Still, whispers followed. She was becoming recognizable beyond financial circles after Fortune's profile last month. Johnson Tech, the revolution, financed by a mother's determination. On stage, 10-year-old Miles adjusted his glasses with the same methodical precision he applied to complex equations. His features had sharpened with age, the resemblance to Marcus becoming more pronounced in his profile and the set of his jaw. But the intensity of his focus, the quiet confidence, those were pure Gabrielle. The final round begins with contestant number 7, Miles Johnson, the announcer declared. Gabrielle watched her son approach the whiteboard, shoulders square, steps measured. The problem flashed on the screen, a complex algebraic equation that would challenge most high school students. Miles studied it for precisely 5 seconds before lifting his marker and working through the solution with devastating efficiency. Correct, the judge announced as Miles capped his marker. In record time. Pride swelled in Gabrielle's chest as applause filled the auditorium. This brilliant boy, once deemed an inconvenience by his father, was now leaving seasoned educators slack-jawed with his mathematical intuition. 3 days later, Gabrielle sat in another auditorium, this time watching Maya dominate her school's debate competition. At 10, Maya had already developed a commanding presence that belied her age. Her topic, economic inequality and its impact on educational outcomes, reflected conversations she'd absorbed around their dinner table. "It is statistically impossible," Maya declared, her voice clear and confident, "for children from certain zip codes to access the same opportunities as their more privileged peers without systematic intervention." As judges awarded Maya first place, Gabrielle recognized the seamless blend of Marcus's eloquence and her own unwavering principles in their daughter. The twins had inherited the best of both parents while being shaped by a narrative of persistence rather than privilege. That evening, their driver pulled up to the gleaming high-rise in San Francisco's Soma district, where they had purchased the penthouse apartment 6 months earlier. As the elevator ascended to the 30th floor, Miles reviewed his trophy while Maya practiced her acceptance speech for a Youth Leadership Award ceremony the following week. "Remember our first apartment in Brooklyn?" Gabrielle asked as they entered the spacious foyer with its sweeping views of the city. "The three of us shared that tiny bedroom with the creaky floor. The one where I could touch both walls if I stretched out my arms," Miles recalled, his analytical mind precise even in memory. "And the neighbors who watched us when you had night classes," Maya added. "Mrs. Rivera always made those cookies with the cinnamon." Gabrielle smiled, grateful they remembered those early struggles without bitterness. She had worked hard to frame their journey as an adventure rather than a hardship, even during the leanest times. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Gabrielle curled up on her balcony with a glass of wine and her tablet. The latest issue of Fortune had arrived in her digital subscriptions. She scrolled through, pausing at the familiar logo that appeared under Companies to Watch. Johnson Tech, The Revolution, financed by a mother's determination. The article detailed her journey from single mother to CEO of a rapidly expanding financial technology company. It highlighted Johnson Tech's innovative approach to credit scoring and its impact on previously underbanked communities. What the profile didn't mention, because Gabrielle never discussed it publicly, was Marcus Reynolds or the circumstances of the twins' birth. She had protected the children from that story, sharing only the barest outline. Their father had chosen not to be part of their lives before they were born. The details of that winter night, the cruel dismissal, the words that had both shattered and ultimately forged her, those remained private. The following week, as Gabrielle prepared for a board meeting, her chief strategy officer entered with an unusual expression. "We've received an acquisition offer," he announced, placing a folder on her desk. $500 million from FinCorp International. Gabrielle's eyebrows rose as she opened the folder. FinCorp was one of the largest financial conglomerates in the world, known for acquiring innovative startups before they could become competitive threats. "They want to integrate our alternative credit scoring system into their global operations," her CSO continued. "It's an extraordinarily generous offer considering our current valuation." Gabrielle studied the terms, mind racing. $500 million. Enough to secure the twins' future for generations. Enough to never worry about money again. "They want an answer within 2 weeks, her CSO added. "Their executives are flying in tomorrow to make their case personally." The FinCorp executives arrived in tailored suits and practiced smiles, their presentation polished to perfection. They spoke of synergies and global reach, of bringing Johnson Tech's innovations to markets worldwide. $500 million, Ms. Johnson, their lead negotiator emphasized. "You and your children would be secure forever." The words echoed in Gabrielle's mind later that day as she visited a community center in Oakland where Johnson Tech had implemented its platform. A young mother approached, explaining how the program had helped her secure a small business loan after traditional banks had repeatedly rejected her. Before your system, no one would take a chance on me, the woman explained, gesturing to her thriving catering business. Now I employ 7 people from my neighborhood. Similar stories greeted Gabrielle throughout the facility. People who had purchased first homes, funded education, launched businesses, all through access to fair financial services. This impact, these transformed lives, were the realization of the vision she had scribbled at her kitchen table while the twins slept. The next morning, Gabrielle called an emergency meeting with her investors. Rachel Montgomery, still her most trusted advisor, attended virtually from New York. From a purely financial perspective, one investor argued, accepting this offer is the obvious choice. The return on investment would be extraordinary. Others nodded in agreement, though Rachel remained conspicuously silent. And what happens to our mission? Gabrielle asked. What happens to the communities we serve when FinCorp inevitably pivots our technology toward more profitable demographics? Business is business, Gabrielle, another investor responded. You've built something valuable. There's no shame in realizing that value. After the meeting, Rachel's face remained on the video screen as others filed out. You've been quiet, Gabrielle observed. Because this isn't my decision to make, Rachel replied. You built this company from nothing. The choice is yours, and I'll support whatever you decide. That evening, Gabrielle brought the question to the twins over dinner in their penthouse. There's a company that wants to buy Johnson Tech, she explained, simplifying the situation for their 10-year-old understanding. If I sell, we would have more money than we could ever spend. But the company might not continue helping the people we started this for. Miles considered this with his characteristic thoroughness. Would you still be in charge? No, I would be wealthy, but I wouldn't control what happens to our technology. Maya's eyes narrowed with intuition beyond her years. You always said money is a tool, not a goal. What's the goal if you sell? Gabrielle studied her daughter, struck by the profound simplicity of the question. Security, I suppose. Certainty about your futures. We're already secure, Miles pointed out pragmatically. We have this apartment, good schools, plenty of food. And you're happiest when you're building things that matter, Maya added. Remember when your system helped Ms. Loretta buy her house? Your face was like Christmas morning. 2 days later, Gabrielle stood before the FinCorp executives in her conference room. I appreciate your generous offer, she began, but Johnson Tech is not for sale. Our mission is just beginning. The lead negotiator's smile faltered. Ms. Johnson, I urge you to reconsider. This offer represents a premium of nearly 40% above your current valuation. The value of what we're building can't be measured solely in dollars, Gabrielle replied. We're transforming access to financial services for communities that have been systematically excluded. That work is not complete. That evening, Gabrielle gathered her team for an impromptu celebration, champagne flowing freely as she announced their independence would continue. To Johnson Tech, she toasted, and to our next chapter, international expansion. As glasses clinked around her, Gabrielle felt a profound certainty that she had made the right choice. The $500 million would have provided security, but at the cost of the purpose that drove her. By refusing $500 million to preserve her vision, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that this decision would not only triple her company's value over the next 5 years, but also place her on a collision course with her past when Marcus Reynolds, desperate for new investors, would cross her path again. The wine glass in Gabrielle's hand caught the last rays of sunset as she stood on her penthouse balcony. Below her, San Francisco glittered with early evening lights, a far cry from the Brooklyn apartment where she'd once counted pennies for baby formula. Her decision to reject FinCorp's offer had proven prescient. In the 2 years since, Johnson Tech Solutions had nearly tripled in value, now worth an estimated $2.7 billion. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder, Final Review, Javits Center Keynote. In 3 days, she would stand before the financial industry's elite at the annual Financial Innovation Conference in New York, announcing Johnson Tech's $50 million fund for supporting mother entrepreneurs. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. returning to the city where Marcus had once declared her worthless, now as one of the most powerful women in finance. "Mom?" Maya's voice came from behind her. At 14, Maya had blossomed into a formidable young woman, her intelligence matched only by her eloquence. The Forbes team confirmed the interview for their cover edition. They want to focus on how a single mother built a multi-billion-dollar empire. Gabrielle smiled, setting down her glass. "Let's schedule it for after we return from New York. How's your brother doing with his college applications?" "Obsessing over his personal statement. Princeton is his dream school." Maya rolled her eyes with theatrical teenage exasperation that couldn't quite mask her pride in her twin. Inside the penthouse, Miles sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by printouts of financial projections. At 14, he mirrored his mother's analytical mind, coupled with a mathematical intuition that had already caught the attention of university recruiters. "Mom, our valuation increased another 3% this week," he announced without looking up. "The expansion into Southeast Asian markets is exceeding growth targets." Gabrielle marveled at her children. These brilliant beings who had once been dismissed as inconveniences by their father had become her most trusted advisors. Miles, recently accepted to Princeton's early admission program, could analyze market trends with uncanny precision. Maya, having won the National Youth Debate Championship last month, had already been invited to intern with a Supreme Court justice next summer. The following morning, Gabrielle reviewed her presentation on the private jet bound for New York. The Johnson Tech Solutions logo gleamed on the aircraft's tail. A bridge spanning a gap, the same symbol the twins had colored for her first makeshift business cards a decade ago. "The fund allocation looks solid," her chief impact officer commented, reviewing the materials for the announcement. $50 million directed specifically to enterprises founded by single mothers. The press will love the narrative. "It's not about the narrative," Gabrielle corrected gently. "It's about addressing a specific market inefficiency. Single mothers represent one of the most undervalued entrepreneurial demographics, with disproportionate barriers to capital." As the plane crossed the country, Gabrielle gazed out the window, memory overlaying the landscape below. She could still feel the sting of that winter night 15 years ago, the weight of her pregnant body as she climbed into a taxi with nowhere to go. Now she commanded resources that would have seemed fantastical to that frightened young woman. Meanwhile, in a considerably smaller office in Midtown Manhattan, Marcus Reynolds stared at his computer screen, the quarterly numbers refusing to improve no matter how long he glared at them. At 47, time had not been entirely kind to him. His still handsome face now carried lines of stress, and silver threaded prominently through his temples. The Reynolds Innovations logo on the wall behind him seemed like a relic from another era, much like the company itself. "The Alvarez Group canceled our meeting," his assistant informed him from the doorway. "Their investment committee decided to explore other opportunities." Marcus suppressed a flash of panic. That was the third potential investor to back out this month. Without a significant capital injection, Reynolds Innovations would struggle to make payroll by quarter's end. The company that had once been poised to revolutionize consumer technology had stagnated under his leadership, a series of miscalculations and missed opportunities eroding its market position. His gaze fell on the conference brochure on his desk, the annual Financial Innovation Conference at the Javits Center. Reynolds Innovations had been relegated to a small booth in a secondary exhibition hall, a humiliating position for what had once been considered a market leader. Still, several key investors would be attending, and Marcus was determined to make one last pitch to save his company. The conference schedule caught his eye, specifically the listing for the keynote address. Gabrielle Johnson, founder and CEO of Johnson Tech Solutions, revolutionizing financial access and announcing major new initiative. The name triggered something in his memory. A Harvard analyst he'd once dated briefly? The timing seemed wrong. He typed Gabrielle Johnson CEO into his search bar, and the results loaded instantly. The woman staring back from his screen bore only a sophisticated resemblance to the young analyst he'd once known. This Gabrielle Johnson radiated power and confidence, her natural hair forming a crown around a face that graced magazine covers and industry awards ceremonies. The Forbes profile described her as the visionary founder who built a $2.7 billion financial technology empire while raising twins as a single mother. Twins. Marcus's blood ran cold as he calculated the years. 15 years ago. The same Gabrielle he had thrown out of his apartment when she told him she was pregnant. The pregnancy he had dismissed as an inconvenience, offering her a check to solve the problem. With shaking hands, he searched for more information about her children. There, a recent photo of Gabrielle accepting an award, flanked by two teenagers. The boy had his chin, his profile. The girl had his eyes. "Mr. Reynolds?" His assistant interrupted his shock. "The car is waiting to take you to the Javits Center." The massive glass structure of the Javits Center gleamed in the autumn sun as Gabrielle's motorcade pulled up to the VIP entrance. Security personnel immediately flanked her vehicle, creating a path through the gathering crowd of conference attendees. "Mom, there are reporters," Maya noted, straightening her blazer. At 14, she already understood the power of public perception, dressing with a sophistication that matched her mother's. "Remember, minimal engagement until after the keynote," Gabrielle reminded them as they exited the vehicle. "We stick to the schedule." Inside, the main exhibition hall buzzed with activity. Johnson Tech's prominent booth near the entrance featured interactive displays showcasing their global impact. 12 million users across 20 countries, 800,000 small business loans facilitated, and 3.2 million first-time homebuyers assisted. Meanwhile, Marcus wandered through a secondary hall where smaller companies competed for attention. The Reynolds Innovations booth looked shabby by comparison. Dated graphics, sparse attendance, a single board representative checking his phone. The contrast with his company's former prominence sent a wave of nausea through him. "Is that Johnson Tech's founder?" he overheard someone nearby whisper excitedly. "They say she's announcing a $100 million initiative today." "The Sequoia partnership is apparently a done deal," another responded. $500 million in new funding. Marcus turned to see a crowd forming near the hall's entrance, surrounding a woman whose presence seemed to magnetize the entire room. Even from a distance, he recognized her, older, more polished, radiating the confidence of someone who had not just survived, but conquered. Gabrielle Johnson moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her twins beside her matching her professional poise. The boy, Marcus couldn't remember if the article had mentioned his name, had the same analytical intensity Marcus had once prided himself on. The girl carried herself with a natural authority that made her seem older than her years. "Mr. Reynolds?" A conference organizer approached, clipboard in hand. "We've placed you in the second afternoon panel on reinventing legacy companies. The main morning sessions are already filled." "I was promised a speaking slot in the main hall," Marcus protested, embarrassment heating his face. "I'm sorry. There was a schedule adjustment. We had to prioritize companies with current market relevance." The organizer's apologetic smile held no real sympathy. Current market relevance. The phrase stung like a slap. From across the hall, Marcus watched as Gabrielle was escorted toward the VIP lounge, surrounded by admirers and industry leaders. The twins walked alongside her, perfectly at ease in this environment of power and privilege. The environment that should have been their birthright from him, not earned through her persistence. The main conference hall was packed to capacity for Gabrielle's keynote address. From his seat in the back row, Marcus watched her take the stage with the confidence of someone who belonged there completely. The giant screens on either side magnified her image as she began speaking, her voice measured and authoritative. "Financial systems were designed by and for a homogeneous group," she began. "The consequences of this design flaw are not just inequitable, they're economically inefficient. At Johnson Tech Solutions, we've proven that serving the underserved isn't charity, it's good business." Her presentation was masterful, concise, data-driven, visionary. She moved seamlessly between global statistics and personal anecdotes, outlining how Johnson Tech had revolutionized access to financial services. Today, I'm pleased to announce the creation of a $50 million fund specifically designed to support enterprises founded by single mothers, she continued. This demographic represents one of the most undervalued entrepreneurial resources in our economy, consistently demonstrating resilience, efficiency, and innovation born of necessity. As she spoke, her gaze swept the audience, momentarily locking with Marcus's in the back row. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, so brief that most wouldn't notice but unmistakable to him. For a heartbeat, 15 years collapsed between them. Some men once told me I didn't have what it takes to survive in Wall Street, she continued, her voice steady despite the moment of recognition. But I discovered I had something much better. The resilience forged by needing to feed 2 babies while completing my MBA at Wharton, working as a waitress at the Denny's in Williamsburg. The audience erupted in applause. Marcus remained frozen in his seat, a cold realization washing over him. She knew he was here. That reference wasn't coincidental. It was a perfectly aimed arrow. As the applause continued, the screens displayed a photograph of Gabrielle from those early days, exhausted, in a waitress uniform, holding 2 infants. The contrast between that image and the powerful CEO standing on stage told a story more compelling than words could express. When the keynote concluded, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Marcus watched as investors and executives flocked to the stage, eager to align themselves with Gabrielle's vision and success. Her twins moved with practiced ease through the crowd, engaging with industry leaders as if they'd been born to this world, which, Marcus realized with a sickening jolt, they should have been, through him. Later, at the reception, Marcus circulated the edges of the crowd, nursing a scotch and watching Gabrielle hold court across the room. Investors who had recently declined meetings with him now waited patiently for a moment of her attention. The irony was unbearable. The woman he had dismissed as mediocre now commanded the respect he had always assumed would be his birthright. While preparing for her speech at the Javits Center, Gabrielle couldn't have imagined that in less than 24 hours she would be face to face with the man who had abandoned her 15 years before, witnessing the complete collapse of the facade of success he had built. The whispers circulated through the grand hall of the Javits Center like wildfire, the undercurrent of excitement palpable among the financial elite. Marcus Reynolds stood at the periphery, scotch in hand, watching as Gabrielle worked the room with effortless grace. The contrast between them couldn't be more stark. Her confident posture and genuine smile against his rigid stance and forced pleasantries. "Did you hear?" a young analyst whispered to his colleague nearby, unaware that Marcus could overhear. "That's Gabrielle Johnson, the billionaire fintech founder. And get this, I just heard from someone on her team that the man who abandoned her when she was pregnant with twins is actually here at the conference." Marcus's hand tightened around his glass. How had this information leaked? "Seriously?" the colleague responded. "What kind of man does that?" "Some trust fund tech bro who thought a pregnant black woman would damage his image with investors. Can you imagine?" Marcus felt the room closing in. His carefully constructed narrative, the successful entrepreneur, the generous philanthropist, the family man, was unraveling thread by thread as the true story spread through the conference. Across the room, Gabrielle's attention was momentarily diverted as Maya whispered something in her ear. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Marcus, then returned to the investor she was speaking with, her expression betraying nothing. The main doors to the reception hall opened and the flow of people shifted as attendees moved toward dinner. Marcus seized his opportunity, navigating the crowd until he stood just a few feet from Gabrielle. 15 years dissolved in an instant. Despite everything, despite the power and poise she now radiated, he could still see traces of the young woman who had once looked at him with love. "Gabrielle," he said, his voice barely steady. "It's been a long time." She turned, her expression cool and composed. The teenage twins at her side immediately tensed, their posture shifting subtly as they flanked their mother. "Marcus Reynolds," she replied, her tone measured. "Yes, it has." Up close, the changes in her were even more striking. The uncertain young analyst was gone, replaced by a woman whose confidence seemed bone-deep. Her natural hair formed a crown around features that had only grown more striking with maturity. The simple yet exquisite jewelry at her throat probably cost more than the monthly lease on his downsized office. "You've done well," he said lamely, gesturing vaguely at the conference around them. "Very well." "I've done exceptionally well," she corrected, no emotion in her voice. "What can I do for you?" The dismissive tone, so similar to what he had once used toward her, landed like a slap. Around them, people were beginning to notice the interaction, conversations quieting as attention shifted their way. "I didn't know," he began, then glanced at the twins who were studying him with unsettling intensity. "About them, their—" "Mama," Maya interrupted, her analytical gaze never leaving Marcus's face. "The panel on funding innovations begins in 5 minutes." "Mama?" Marcus repeated stupidly, as if the word itself was foreign. You must have married." A cold smile touched Gabrielle's lips. "No, Marcus, I never married. These are Miles and Maya Johnson, my children." She paused deliberately. "Our children, biologically speaking, though you made it abundantly clear that you wanted no part of that responsibility." The twins' expressions shifted at this confirmation, their eyes taking in Marcus with renewed interest, as if he were a specimen under glass. "Is it him?" Miles asked, his voice calm and remarkably similar to Marcus's own at that age. Gabrielle nodded once. Panic surged through Marcus. This public revelation, these teenagers who carried his blood, it was all moving too quickly. "I have rights," he began, the desperation in his voice transparent even to his own ears. "Rights?" Maya's laugh was sharp as a razor, her eyes, his eyes, flashing with an intelligence that stripped him bare. "What rights would the man have who told our mother she didn't have what it takes to survive in this world? The man who threw her out, pregnant, in the middle of a winter night?" Marcus felt blood drain from his face. "How do you know?" "Our mother never lied to us," Miles interjected, his tone factual rather than accusatory. "We know the whole story. How she slept in the subway station, how you blocked her access to jobs, how she worked in 3 different restaurants while attending Wharton." A small circle of onlookers had formed around them, drawn by the palpable tension. Marcus recognized several potential investors among them, their expressions shifting from curiosity to something harder as they pieced together the situation. "Gabrielle," he pleaded, sweat beading at his hairline, "could we speak privately?" "I don't believe we have anything to discuss," she replied, checking her watch, a subtle yet unmistakable dismissal. "I have a meeting with Sequoia Capital in 10 minutes to finalize our investment round." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. The Sequoia deal was the most coveted partnership at the conference, a fact Marcus knew all too well. He had been trying unsuccessfully to secure a meeting with them for months. "Mother built an empire from nothing," Maya added, her voice carrying easily in the acoustics of the reception hall. "While you, from what we've researched, have consistently lost market share over the past 5 years." Marcus became acutely aware of the prominent industry figures now openly watching the exchange, including 2 investors he had been desperately courting. His company's financial troubles were supposed to be confidential, yet this teenage girl had casually exposed them in a room full of potential lifelines. "I made a mistake," he whispered desperately, stepping closer. "I was young, I was afraid." "We were afraid too," Gabrielle interrupted, her voice now carrying a controlled emotion that silenced the room. "A single mother of twins, blacklisted from her industry by a powerful, vindictive man. But I never abandoned my children. I never gave up when it got difficult." The murmurs around them intensified. Marcus saw his professional reputation disintegrating in real time, years of carefully cultivated connections witnessing his humiliation. "I'd like to know them now," he insisted, looking at the twins with what he hoped appeared as genuine interest rather than desperate damage control. "Make up for lost time. I am their father, after all." Maya met his gaze directly, her 14-year-old face showing a maturity that transcended her years. "Our mother taught us that some people confuse abandonment with freedom," she said clearly. "She freed us to build something greater than your name or your money could ever buy." The words struck with surgical precision. Around them, phones had appeared, discreetly recording the exchange. Tomorrow, this confrontation would be discussed in boardrooms across Manhattan. "Miles, Maya," Gabrielle said calmly, "we should head to our meeting with Sequoia. Mr. Reynolds surely has his own obligations." As they turned to leave, Marcus reached out impulsively, his fingers barely brushing Gabrielle's arm. "Please," he said, voice cracking. "Just 5 minutes." The look she gave him wasn't angry. It was worse, pitying. 15 years ago, I begged you for 5 minutes to explain why our baby deserved a father. You said, and I quote, 'You're a burden I cannot carry.'" Her voice carried just far enough to reach the closest observers. "Now you know what it feels like when someone decides you're not worth their time." With that, she guided the twins through the parting crowd, leaving Marcus standing alone in a circle of judging eyes and whispered commentaries. Within the hour, the confrontation had spread throughout the conference. Marcus's scheduled meetings began canceling one after another. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications, first professional, then personal as the story leaked to social media. "What the hell is happening?" His wife Claire's voice cut through when he finally answered his phone. "Connor just showed me a Twitter thread about you abandoning your pregnant girlfriend 15 years ago. There are videos, Marcus. Videos of her children, your children, confronting you." "Claire, I can explain." "Explain to your children," she snapped. "Your actual children, the ones you've been raising. The ones who are asking me right now if they have siblings their father never told them about." The following morning, exhausted and desperate, Marcus arrived at Gabrielle's hotel before 7. He had barely slept, his mind racing between damage control strategies for both his company and his marriage. When he approached the front desk, he was surprised when the concierge actually called up to Gabrielle's suite. "Ms. Johnson will see you in the lobby lounge in 15 minutes, sir," the man informed him. The lounge was nearly empty at this hour. Marcus chose a corner table, ordering coffee with trembling hands. When Gabrielle appeared, she was already immaculately dressed for the day in a tailored burgundy suit that probably cost more than his best one. She sat across from him, declining the offered coffee. "I came to apologize properly," he began, the dark circles under his eyes betraying his sleepless night. "What I did was unforgivable." "I agree," Gabrielle replied simply. "But I want to make things right," he continued, leaning forward. "I want to know my children, be part of their lives." Gabrielle observed him with an expression bordering on pity. "Marcus, you really don't understand, do you? This isn't about revenge or punishment, it's simply too late." "It's never too late to be a father," he insisted. "Father?" She raised an eyebrow. "Father isn't a title you earn by contributing genetic material. It's a constant presence. It's sleepless nights. It's high fevers and school projects. It's wiping tears and celebrating victories." Marcus felt the weight of 15 years of absence pressing down on him. "I can learn. I can try." "Miles and Maya don't need you trying," Gabrielle responded. "They already have everything they need. They're about to enter the best universities in the country. They have emotional and financial stability. They have a mother who never, not for a single second, made them feel they weren't enough." Marcus's phone vibrated, another text from Claire, informing him she was moving to her parents' house with their children. "I need time to consider whether I want to remain married to someone capable of such cruelty," she had written. "My life is falling apart," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I'm familiar with the feeling," Gabrielle responded without rancor. You'll survive. I survived." At that moment, Miles and Maya appeared in the lobby, ready for their flight back to San Francisco. "Could we talk?" Marcus asked the teenagers desperately. Miles glanced at his mother, who nodded slightly. 5 minutes, the boy conceded. In an awkward, brief conversation, Marcus attempted to establish some connection. He mentioned his own mathematical abilities when younger, tried to find common interests. Maya observed him with calculating eyes, his eyes, while Miles maintained a polite distance. "You have my number," Marcus concluded, handing them each a business card. "If you want to talk, get to know your half-siblings." "Mr. Reynolds," Maya interrupted formally, "we appreciate your outreach, but to be clear, we didn't miss you. We never missed you. Our mother ensured we never lacked anything, not love, not guidance, not example." "Maybe someday," Miles added, with a gentleness reminiscent of Gabrielle, "when we're adults and can make that decision completely for ourselves." As Marcus Reynolds watched Gabrielle Johnson depart in her limousine, accompanied by the children he never knew and the investors he had always wanted to impress, he finally understood the true meaning of loss. Not the apartment he had kept, or the status he had preserved, but the extraordinary family that could have been his, now forever beyond his reach. Marcus Reynolds stood frozen in the hotel lobby, watching as the limousine carrying Gabrielle and the twins disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. The business cards he had so desperately pressed into their hands suddenly seemed pathetic. Thin rectangles of cardstock bearing the name of a failing company, offered to children who had never needed him. A family that had thrived specifically because of his absence. Within hours, the story had spread like wildfire through the financial conference. Wherever Marcus went, conversations halted abruptly, replaced by uncomfortable glances and poorly disguised whispers. The tech executive who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend 15 years ago, confronted by the brilliant children he'd rejected, it was too delicious a scandal for the typically staid financial community to resist. "Mr. Reynolds?" A conference organizer approached hesitantly. "I'm afraid your panel participation has been reassigned, given the circumstances." Marcus nodded numbly. No explanation was necessary. Who would want to hear business advice from a man whose personal judgment had proven so catastrophically flawed? By evening, his email inbox had filled with cancellations. The investors he'd hoped to court were suddenly unavailable for meetings. His phone buzzed incessantly with notifications from social media and news alerts, each more damning than the last. Reynolds Innovations CEO confronted by abandoned children at financial conference. Billionaire fintech founder Gabrielle Johnson reveals, "My children's father said I'd never survive in business." Twin prodigies publicly reject father who abandoned their mother. When Marcus finally returned to his hotel room, he found 3 voicemails from Claire. The last one, left just 20 minutes earlier, was brutally succinct. "I've taken Connor and Emma to my parents. I've spoken with a lawyer. Don't come home until I've decided what I want to do about our marriage." He sank onto the edge of the bed, the full weight of consequences finally crushing down. In 24 hours, he had lost his business prospects, his public reputation, and potentially his marriage. The children he had raised, 10-year-old Connor and 12-year-old Emma, would now learn that their father had abandoned 2 other children before they were born. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from his chief financial officer. "Board called emergency meeting, voting on your temporary removal as CEO. Sorry." The Reynolds Innovations Board of Directors had suggested he take a leave of absence while the PR team attempted to mitigate the damage. The message was clear. He had become a liability to the company that bore his name. Marcus ordered room service and a bottle of scotch, neither of which he touched. Instead, he sat by the window overlooking the city, watching lights flicker in distant office buildings, wondering how many contained people whose lives had been touched by Gabrielle Johnson's financial innovations. The woman he had dismissed as mediocre had transformed access to capital for millions, while his own company struggled to remain relevant. The following morning, red-eyed and unshaven, Marcus found himself in a cab heading to the airport where Gabrielle's private jet would be departing. He had no plan, no prepared speech, only a desperate need to make one final attempt at… what? Redemption? Connection? Even he couldn't articulate what he hoped to achieve. At the private aviation terminal, he was surprised when security actually called up to the jet. "Ms. Johnson says you can have 5 minutes on the tarmac, sir," the guard informed him, eyeing his disheveled appearance with suspicion. The Johnson Tech Solutions jet gleamed in the morning sun, its livery bearing the same bridge logo that had begun as a child's crayon drawing on Gabrielle's first business cards. The steps were down, and as Marcus approached, Gabrielle appeared at the doorway. She descended halfway, maintaining the literal and figurative high ground. "You look terrible," she observed without malice. Marcus ran a hand through his uncombed hair. "The board is suspending me. Claire has taken the kids to her parents. The investors I was courting have all ghosted me." He looked up at her. "In 24 hours, you've completely destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy anything, Marcus," Gabrielle replied calmly. "I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own actions." "Protecting me?" he echoed, confused. "For 15 years I've never publicly named you. I've never pursued child support. I've never used my growing influence to expose how you treated me." Her voice remained measured, professional. "I didn't mention you yesterday to harm you. I mentioned you because I've reached a point where your existence is irrelevant to my story." The casual dismissal stung worse than anger would have. "My children, Connor and Emma, they're innocent in this," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "They don't deserve to learn about their father this way." For the first time, a flash of genuine emotion crossed Gabrielle's face. "You're right, they don't." She paused. "I'll have my PR team release a statement clarifying that this private matter should remain private for the sake of all children involved. I have no interest in causing pain to your family." The grace of her response made Marcus feel even smaller. "Thank you," he managed. "Is that why you came here?" she asked. "To protect your current children?" "Partly," he admitted, "and partly because I need to understand how you did it, how you built all of this after I…" He trailed off, unable to articulate the magnitude of what he had done. "After you threw me out like garbage?" Gabrielle finished for him, not unkindly. "I did it day by day, hour by hour. I waited tables with swollen ankles. I studied while breastfeeding twins. I built algorithms between diaper changes." Her eyes held his. "I did it because you were wrong about me, and I needed to prove it. First to myself, then to my children, and finally to the world." From inside the jet, Miles appeared at the doorway. "Mom, we need to finalize the Sequoia paperwork before takeoff." "I'll be right there," she called back, before returning her attention to Marcus. "Was there anything else?" Marcus looked past her to where Miles stood, this remarkable young man with his analytical mind and quiet confidence. Beyond him, he caught a glimpse of Maya in the jet's interior, absorbed in what appeared to be legal briefs despite being only 14. "They're extraordinary," he said quietly. "You've done an amazing job with them." "Yes," Gabrielle agreed simply. "I have." "Will they ever…" he began. "That's entirely up to them," she interrupted. "When they're adults, they may decide they want to know you, or they may not. I won't influence that decision either way." A notification chimed on Gabrielle's phone. "I need to go. We have the Sequoia signing in San Francisco this afternoon." As she turned to ascend the stairs, Marcus called after her. "Gabrielle, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly sorry." She paused, looking back at him. "I believe you are. But Marcus, your apology isn't for me to accept or reject. It's for you to live with." She gestured toward the gleaming aircraft. "I've moved beyond needing anything from you, validation, apology, or recognition. That's what real freedom looks like." With that, she climbed the remaining steps. The door closed, and minutes later, The jet taxied toward the runway, leaving Marcus standing alone on the tarmac. Back in San Francisco that evening, Gabrielle sat in her office reviewing the finalized Sequoia Capital agreement. The $650 million investment would fund Johnson Tech's expansion into emerging markets across Africa and Southeast Asia, potentially bringing financial services to another 30 million underserved individuals. A soft knock at the door interrupted her concentration. Miles and Maya entered, both still processing the events of the past 2 days. "Are you okay, Mom?" Maya asked, perceptive as always. Gabrielle considered the question carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I am. Better than okay, actually." "You don't seem angry at him," Miles observed. "I thought you would be." Gabrielle set down her tablet and turned her full attention to her children. "For years I was angry. That anger helped fuel me when I was too exhausted to continue. But at some point, I'm not sure exactly when, the anger transformed into something else." "Into what?" Maya asked. "Perspective," Gabrielle replied. "I realized that if he hadn't forced me to build something on my own terms, I might never have discovered what I was truly capable of. His cruelty was the catalyst for everything we've built together." Miles, ever the pragmatist, nodded thoughtfully. Statistically speaking, children from two-parent households with significant financial resources do show certain advantages in educational outcomes, but numerous studies indicate that parental engagement quality is a stronger predictor of success than family structure or wealth. Gabrielle smiled at her son's analytical approach to their family story. "Exactly. And you two have had one completely engaged parent rather than two partially engaged ones." "He seemed diminished," Maya noted. "Not at all what I expected from the villain in our origin story." "Most villains are just people who made terrible choices," Gabrielle replied. "His worst choice became our greatest opportunity." Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Gabrielle stepped onto her penthouse balcony overlooking San Francisco Bay. The lights of the city sparkled below, a far cry from the Brooklyn apartment where she had once counted pennies for baby formula. In her hand, she held the letter she had written to her unborn children 15 years ago, the paper now yellowed with age. "You will never need his name, his money, or his approval," she had written in those dark days after Marcus's rejection. "We will build our own empire." The promise had been fulfilled beyond anything she could have imagined then. Johnson Tech Solutions now employed nearly 800 people across 5 countries. The platform she had coded during sleepless nights between feedings now served 12 million users. The twins, who had once been deemed inconveniences by their father, were now academic prodigies with limitless futures ahead of them. As Gabrielle reviewed the Sequoia contract on her tablet, she felt neither triumph nor vindication about Marcus's downfall. His relevance to her story had ended the moment she decided his rejection would become her motivation rather than her defeat. The company's international expansion would begin next quarter, bringing financial services to communities that traditional banking had ignored for generations. There was work to do, an empire to expand, and a future to build that had nothing to do with Marcus Reynolds. Not as partner, not as antagonist. He was simply irrelevant, and that, Gabrielle realized, was the most complete justice she could have ever imagined. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.